So when he actually walked me through the murder, it wasn't what I had expected. It was like he was talking about some painting he had made that he was really proud of. He told me like with passion, like he was talking about a masterpiece. He seemed like excited. I grew up in Sweden with my mum and partly with my dad. So my mum left my dad when I had just been born really, because my dad went to prison like a few days after I was born. And she had enough, so she left him. I know that my mum took me to see my dad at the prison at a few occasions, but when I was 3, my dad got released, and I started seeing him regularly. And in the beginning, it was really nice. It was really good. But then, you know, with time, he started to show his true colors. My dad was very unpredictable, so he could go from being like very nice and funny to being like to just switch, and his eyes would go pitch black and he would become this monster out of nowhere.
Were you afraid of him?
Yeah. When he switched like that, I got very scared. My dad was very into horror films and, you know, the devil, demons. He introduced that to me when I was very young, like 3 maybe. He started showing me horror movies like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, those are not that bad, but to a 3-year-old, they are. When I got a bit older, around 5, 6, he started to, I would call it brainwashing, because he made me believe things. He made me see things and believe things that wasn't real. We could lay in the bed in the dark and I was just about to fall asleep, and he would go like, "Oh, Jamie, do you see the faces up in the ceiling?" And he would go on and go on until I actually saw them. And that would make me so scared, and I would just put the duvet over my face and try to fall asleep, and he would like sit there and laugh.
He would laugh?
Yeah. If I got scared, he laughed.
So do you think he was kind of gaining some enjoyment out of scaring you as a child?
Yeah. I was quite bullied in school, and one time I told him I was bullied and I was very upset about it, and his solution for that was to give me a voodoo doll. It was a doll that he had made himself, like this big, and also a needle that I was supposed to like put in the doll where I wanted my bullies to get hurt.
Were you ever scared that he might hurt you?
Every time I was very scared that he would hurt me. He was very close once when he was like walking up to me, and I was just sitting there in the sofa, curled up, shaking, and then he put his fist like this, and I just shut my eyes and waited for the punch. It never happened. He walked away and then acted like nothing had happened. But you know, sometimes I actually wish that he would just punch me in the face instead of like messing with my brain that much. I think that would be, some of it would be easier to heal from.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly manipulative and confusing and terrifying all kind of at once.
My experience was that he did become like angrier and angrier, and it got even worse when he met his ex-girlfriend. Helen and my dad met at a psychiatric hospital. And I remember the first time I saw her, he introduced me to her. And I remember like her red, long hair. I really wished that they would stay together because I really liked her. She was very like fierce, and she wasn't afraid. She wasn't afraid of him.
And she was kind to you?
She was kind at first. She was really, really kind. She told me she loved me like her own daughter, and I started loving her like my own mom. Like I really, really, really loved her so much. I adored her. But then again, she had her problems, her mental issues. Like she was bipolar. So she could also go from being very loving and caring towards me to just, you know, switch, and she wanted nothing to do with me. And she would tell my dad, Lisa, can go and take your daughter because I can't stand her.
And how old were you at the point that Helen came into your life?
I think I was 7. Yeah.
And their relationship, initially, what did that look like?
Their relationship was like a horror movie. It was awful. They were so toxic for each other. They could have fun and laugh together and have good times together. But then out of nowhere, they would both switch, and both became as dangerous as each other. Like there was no one that was under the other. Like it wasn't my dad screaming and hurting her. They were both like as bad as each other. Multiple times he would say to her like something like, if you're not out of the flat when I'm back, then I'm going to kill you. And he would say it in a way that he really meant it. And I would say to my dad, don't say that. And he would go like, but it's true. I always felt like he was minutes away from just pulling up a knife and kill her right in front of me, like every time. The last time I met Helen, she had cooked me food, and as she served the food, she said, enjoy your meal, because this is the last time I'll ever cook for you, because Isakin is going to kill me. I was so scared at that point, and she said it like she really, really meant it, and she wasn't even upset about it. She said it like in a calm, direct way, and I just went, no, don't say that, it's not true, stop it. And she said like, yeah, it's true, I'm not gonna lie to you.
Did you believe her?
Yeah. I believed her, but I believed that she would manage to escape before it happened.
Do you remember when you got the news about what had happened to Helen?
So I think it was the weekend. After that weekend, the last time I saw her, I had made my mind up that I never wanted to go back again, ever. So instead, I was going to spend the weekend at my nan's. And it was Saturday, and I was supposed to stay to Sunday, but my mum called and she said that she wanted to come and get me. I realized that something was wrong. And when my mum came to pick me up, she had like red eyes, and I could see that she had been crying a lot. And I kept asking my mum what has happened, because I could tell that something was really, really, really wrong. And she wouldn't tell me. She said, I'll tell you later. So that evening, my mum called me to their bedroom. She was like shaking. She was absolutely shaking, like she couldn't like control herself. And I knew that was when she was going to tell me the big news. And she said, so I'm about to tell you something and you are going to be very upset. And when she said that, I just went, no, don't tell me, I don't want to know. I just screamed, no, don't tell me. And I tried to like run away from the bedroom, but she kept holding me. And then she just went, Helen's dead. And when she said that, I just panicked. I started screaming and I couldn't breathe. I just kept saying, no, 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 it's not true, you're lying, it's not true. I've never felt such panic in my body before. And then when we had calmed down a bit, my first thought was it Dad? And so I asked her, and she went, yeah. And then when she said that, it was, you know, the magic that lives in every child, you know, that sparkling magic in their eyes, that innocence that died in me when she said that. And the next day I woke up and I felt nothing.
Sorry, Jamie.
No, that's okay.
And you were 9 years old?
Yeah. After that night, everything changed. My life, as I knew it, didn't exist anymore. I wasn't allowed to watch TV. I wasn't allowed to listen to the radio. I wasn't allowed to go to shops. I wasn't allowed to go to school for like a month. They kept the curtains down because neighbors passing by tried to sneak in. So one day my mum actually did take me to the shop, and as we were walking towards the exit, I just all of a sudden saw my dad's face all across like the Sweden's biggest newspaper, and I saw the words cannibal, and I didn't know what the word cannibal meant. So but as I saw that his face, you know, my dad's face on that newspaper, I just froze to ice, and my mom had to like drag me away from that. But I went home and I googled the word cannibal, and as I was reading it, I had to stop because it was too brutal and disgusting, and I couldn't accept that my dad would have anything to do with that word. But my mum and her wife had seen like the Google history, and they had seen that I had Googled for cannibal. So they talked to me and said, Jamie, please don't try to find out anything more about him or the murder or that word because you are too young to know. Please just trust us when we say that. So I actually stopped trying to find out anything more about the murder.
And I guess during this time, what was happening with your father?
Yeah, so he had got sentenced to this psychiatric institute, and I wasn't in contact with him for the first 2 years, but his mum, my nan, was. So she went to see him and she talked to him on a regular basis, and she started to manipulate me into start talking to my dad again. She actually set up a call for me and my dad, and I spoke to him for the first time when I was 11.
How was that?
I remember I was really, really scared, and I remember him saying, "Hello, my angel," like nothing had happened. He always said that to me, my angel, my little angel. It was so nice to hear my dad's voice again, because when he killed Helen, it was like I had lost two people. I had lost her, and then I had lost my dad, because in my world I would never see him again. When I talked to him, it was really nice to hear his voice, and he didn't mention anything about the murder, and I didn't ask about it. I just asked like, So what are they giving you to eat? Have you made any friends? Like those kind of questions. And he would ask me about school, but he mostly spoke about himself, as he usually do. And then he ended the conversation by saying, you definitely don't have to come and see me, but it would make me really, really happy. I went and saw him like a few months later. We drove up to the city where the hospital is still. It was like a 4-hour drive. I was so nervous. I was like shaking. I didn't know what to expect. I thought that he had turned into some sort of monster, that he would be like really, really big and have this really dark voice, like a killer. But then I saw him. He walked out of this big door and he looked so tiny. He had lost so much weight. And he walked up to me and hugged me really, really tight. And that was the first time I ever saw him crying. And he said something like, I can't believe you're here. So during that visit, he actually didn't even mention the murder once. We didn't talk about it. We just had so much fun and we were laughing so much. And I felt like I had gotten my dad back, you know. It's so weird because he still was this killer, and he had taken Helen away, and he was hated by the entire country and parts of the world. But it was still just my dad, and I just couldn't wrap my mind around that he had killed her, and he wouldn't talk about it. So it was just so surreal. I think I went into denial, like on purpose, because I so wanted my dad back.
And did you continue to see him whenever you could?
Yeah, I went to visit him, I think, once a month.
And I know that your kind of subsequent teenage years were quite difficult for you, undoubtedly, because of everything you went through. I guess the emotional state you found yourself in through this time, what did that look like?
I became a very dark person. Like everything was just so dark. Everything around me was just dark. Like in school, I was bullied because of my dad. People called me like, oh, you're the cannibal's daughter. Like that's the thing everyone just knew me as. No one knew me as Jamie. I was just the cannibal's daughter. Yeah, so wherever I turned, it was just darkness. And I had accepted that darkness as my reality, and that was just my life. And I felt such hatred for myself. I didn't really know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I stopped going to school. I dropped out when I was 14 and started hanging out with the wrong crowd and got into drugs. And yeah, it got really bad. And I was like a full-on addict at 15. I started seeing my dad on my own, without a supervisor and without my nan and without my mum. And he would use our visits, like every time I went there, he would sit there. It was like a brainwashing session. He would sit there for 2 or 4 hours just talking about the darkness that was going on in his mind. He would make me believe that everything was an illusion, that no one existed except for me and him. He would make me believe that we were angels sent from hell, that I was like a daughter of the devil. It had gotten to a point where I was so deep down, like in the addiction, and my world, as I said, was so dark because of my dad. Like it was no light to be seen. It wasn't a world where I wanted to live in, you know. And I had gotten so depressed to the point where I didn't see a way out, and I wanted to kill myself. I had never felt that way before, and so I was really, really scared. I actually felt like, shit, I want to die. So I went to my safe space, my dad, my safe person, and asked him, I said to him, Dad, I don't know what to do, I want to die. I want to kill myself. If something doesn't happen like now, I am going to kill myself. And he said, all right, so then there is only one solution. And he told me about this ritual. And he said if I do that ritual with him, that everything would change. I would become very happy, very successful, and I would receive everything I ever wanted in my whole life, for the rest of my life. And so this ritual was a ritual to the devil. It was a ritual where I was going to sell my soul to the devil. So he sat me down in this visitor's room, and he told me to hold his hands, and we were sitting like in front of each other. And as we were holding each other's hands, he told me to close my eyes, and so I did. And then he said, say after me. And he started saying these words to the devil. It lasted for about 10 minutes. It was very long. And as I was saying these words, I felt sick to my stomach, and I felt like, what am I doing? I just kept thinking to myself, I can't be doing this, I can't be doing this. But then I thought, oh shit, now it's too late, it's too late. Now I have to keep going, it's too late, there is no way back now. And then when we finished saying these words, we still kept our eyes shut and we're still holding each other's hands. And I remember feeling like we were in this pitch black space, like we were floating in some black space. It was really weird. And my dad said, can you see them around you, Jamie? Can you see the beings that are flying around you now, Jamie? They will always be here, they will always follow you. And for now, you can't see them. I can see them all the time, but you can't. But soon enough you'll start hear them and then eventually see them. But don't be scared, because they're here to help you. And these were like demons. I've never been so scared in my life. Because I just knew that at any point I would start hearing them. And there was no way to stop it. It was too late. I had sold my soul to the devil. It couldn't be undone. And I came home to my mum, and I was just shaking, looking down on the floor, and my mum would ask me, what happened, Jamie? What happened? What's wrong with you? And I remember it felt like I was underwater. I couldn't really hear her. I remember sitting there like curled up in the sofa, and I was just shaking, and I covered my eyes, I covered my ears, and I just knew like anytime I will lose it, anytime now I will lose my mind, and I will never come back again. And I started like pulling my hair, and like I couldn't breathe. I knew that I was losing my mind, and I couldn't stop it. And I just started like hitting my head, and I kept hearing my dad's voice over and over again, like, you'll start hearing them, you'll start seeing them, they'll always be with you, Jamie. So I texted my mum to come down, because I wanted to say goodbye to her, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to in a few seconds. So she came down, and I just screamed bye mum, I'm going now. I won't be back. And she, God, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Do you want to take a minute?
No, it's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah. She just panicked and like, Jamie, what's wrong? What's going on? Because she didn't know what was going on at my dad's. And she just held me, and I managed to tell her what my dad had done. I said, Mum, my dad have sold my soul to the devil, and there's no turning back. I can't do anything about it, Mum. I'm sorry I did that. I said, any moment now I'll go insane, Mum. You have to drive me to some hospital somewhere, because I won't be able to be here. When I said that, she got furious. She said, how the hell can your dad say that to you? How can he do that to you? To his own daughter, how can he do that? Then she held me for so long. She just held me for so long, and she said, Jamie, your dad could never make you into what he is, because you are love and light. You can never be that darkness that he is, because you are love and light. You can never be that. You don't have to be afraid, because your love and your light is so much stronger than his darkness. So I think my mum saved me that night. Yeah.
Your relationship with your father from that point, was it different?
It was very difficult the time after. So it went like 2 or 3 weeks when, without me talking to him, he called me. I wouldn't answer. But then I finally called him, and then I said, Dad, I felt really bad after that ritual. And if we are going to stay in contact, I don't want you to involve me in your in that kind of stuff anymore. And when I said that, I was very surprised, because he said to me, oh, but Jamie, I did this so that you would realize that you don't want to be in this anymore. I wanted you to make your way out of my darkness. I think it was a few months after, when we were sitting in the visitor's room also, talking about dark stuff. And then all of a sudden he went, do you want me to walk you through the murder? And I said, yeah, because I actually still didn't know what really had happened, because my dad had said to me, don't bother reading the papers because they are lying anyway. So when he actually walked me through the murder, it wasn't what I had expected, because when he did, it was like he was talking about some painting he had made that he was really proud of. He told me like with passion, like he was talking about a masterpiece. And he walked me through every little small detail. And as I was sitting there like feeling sick to my stomach, he seemed like excited to talk about it. And I think that's when it all just became very real to me. And that's the first time I actually felt like my dad is a killer. The way he went through with the murder was very, very brutal, very, very twisted, like taken out from a horror movie. According to my dad, he committed the murder and did it in such a twisted and sick way to go to the mental institute instead of prison. Like, so he did all of that whole sick and brutal act just to go to the mental institute instead of prison, because he knew that there he would get more freedom. But as my dad is a very big fan of horror movies, I think that he saw this whole thing as a very good opportunity to live out some really dark fantasies.
How did you feel that day after hearing that from, the first time he'd actually spoken to you about what had happened?
I felt like my whole perspective of my dad changed. I couldn't see him in the same light anymore.
And from that moment, was that when you decided to, I guess, kind of put a pause in the relationship and cut him out?
Yeah, I just grabbed all of my stuff and left. And then I didn't talk to him for 4 years. Those 4 years where I didn't have anything to do with my dad is the best 4 years of my life. I finally got a chance to get my own perspective of the world and to actually find myself without him and without his darkness. I started to go to the gym. I quit doing drugs. I eventually quit smoking, quit drinking. I met my now fiance, and I remember one night we were walking from McDonald's, and none of us had any education, no money, nothing. We had literally nothing. All we had was our trauma, our shitty past, and addiction, And we started talking about traveling, like it was some far away fantasy, But then I was like, but wait, why can't we travel? Why couldn't we travel? And we went but we don't have any money. I was like, right, but let's make money then. But we don't have any job. Let's get a job then. But we don't have any education. Okay, let's get education then, And it was like a whole new world just opened up to us. And I was like, oh my God, everything is possible. I don't have to live in this shitty, dark world anymore. I can do whatever the fuck I want, From that day, we have worked ourselves to where we are today. And now we are traveling.
So glad to hear that. I mean, it's amazing, that turnaround. I don't think a lot of people have the strength to get out of such dark places often. So it's, really remarkable that you've pulled yourself out of that.
And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm telling this story for those people that finds it hard to get out from those dark places.
And we've kind of spoke about meeting your fiance and going traveling. And I know that was it last year that you decided to see your dad?
It was pretty much exactly a year ago, yeah. When I had my son, Sylvester, I started thinking a lot of my dad. And I started thinking, right, what my dad doing? What is he thinking? How is he feeling? I didn't know if he had gotten any more freedom. I didn't know anything about him anymore. And you're starting to fantasize. Oh my God, what if my son had a granddad? I had just given birth to my baby girl, Birdie, and I actually went and just knocked on my dad's door without him knowing. And that's the first time we saw each other in 4 years.
How were you feeling?
I was so scared. But he opened the door And when he saw me, he just looked at me like he had seen a ghost. And he didn't say anything. He just looked at me like this. And then he went like, oh shit. The first thing I wanted to confront my dad about, like the first thing on the top of my mind was the fact that he had sold my soul to the devil. And so I did. I asked him about that, and I was very surprised about his answer when he said that he did not regret it at all. Like that was the proudest moment of his life when he sold my soul to the devil, because he believed that all of my successes and all of my happiness is because of that moment when he sold my soul to the devil.
That's how did it feel hearing that?
It was disappointing, you know. I wanted him to like be proud of me for everything that I had accomplished, you know, against all odds. But then he thinks he's the reason that happened, and the fact that he sold my soul to the devil. So that was very disappointing. It felt like I was in a different position. I didn't feel like he had any power over me there and then. But I am still very happy I had that conversation with my dad, because I got to walk away and not having to wonder anymore. I won't have to wonder if I'll ever have him in my life again. I won't have to wonder what he looks like, what he's at mentally. I know now, and I know that I never ever in my life want anything to do with him again. I will never see him again in my life. He might as well be dead. And that is sad, you know, mourning someone that's still alive.
Do you still love your dad?
I think it's impossible to stop loving a parent.
And I guess, you know, all that you've been through and, you know, what happened when you were a young child, how has that impacted or kind of shaped the way that you want to raise your own children?
I want to give my kids everything that I never had. I want to give them safety and unconditional love. I never want them to be introduced to any kind of darkness. My kids came here as love and light, and as love and light they will go.
And just one final question, Jamie. If you could say something to the little Jamie all those years ago going through what you went through, what would you say to her?
If I could show her a video, I would just show her like a small clip, like just 3 seconds of what there is to come, and just leave it like that. And I would say, just wait, it's gonna get better.
A little bit of hope.
A little bit of hope.
So there'd be freezing cold water, and she would lay us down in the bath. And it was only when we got to that point where you're basically drowning, she'd maybe hold us for 10 seconds more and then pull us up.